discussion. This is the second of 3 panel discussions the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention is hosting over the course of September, Suicide Prevention Month. The conversation will also be live tweeted, and you can share your thoughts, ideas, and questions on Twitter by tweeting #SuicideReporting or by adding your questions in the Q&A area of this Hangout. When we consider the issue of teen suicide, the sobering reality is that among individuals aged 15 to 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death, and 16% of U.S. high school students report they seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. Through this panel series and our broader work at the Action Alliance, our goal is to raise awareness of suicide as a public health issue and promote a national conversation around suicide that's focused on hope, connectedness, social support, resilience, treatment, and recovery, with a goal of saving 20,000 lives in 5 years. The way suicide is covered by the media can have either a negative influence on behavior by contributing to sensationalism and contagion, or a positive influence by encouraging help-seeking and reducing stigma. More than 50 research studies worldwide have found that certain types of news coverage can increase the likelihood of suicide in vulnerable populations. Responsible reporting can change popular misconceptions and correct falsehoods. Hopefully, our discussion today will underscore that suicide is a complex issue, and there are generally multiple causes that contribute to it. I encourage everyone on this call to take a look at the recommendations for reporting on suicide located at www.reportingonsuicide.org. Again, that's www.reportingonsuicide.org. Today, in the lead up to World Suicide Prevention Day, we're focusing our conversation on teens and the role of social media and technology in suicide and suicide prevention. We have an exciting panel with us here today to talk about these issues, and I'd like to take a quick minute to introduce them to you. Joining us is Dr. Dan Reidenberg. Dan is a leading expert in suicide prevention. Dan is the executive director of the Suicide Awareness Voices of Education organization. He's also the managing director of the National Council for Suicide Prevention, and he's the U.S. representative for the International Association of Suicide Prevention. Dr. Victor Schwartz is also on our panel. Dr. Schwartz is the medical director of the JED Foundation. He served as the director of the Counseling Center at Yeshiva University and is a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the NYU School of Medicine.
Thanks, Jack.
David Bond is joining us from the Trevor Project, where he serves as their vice president of programs. David is a licensed clinical social worker and a board-certified expert in traumatic stress. As many of you may already know, the Trevor Project is the leading national organization providing suicide prevention and crisis intervention services to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth. Next up is Chad Moses, who is the music and events coordinator for the nonprofit movement To Write Love on Our Arms, who are dedicated to presenting hope and finding help for people struggling with depression, addiction, self-injury, and suicide. Chad's work at To Write Love on Our Arms began as an intern, and he's been part of their music and events team since 2008. He speaks on their behalf at events and on college campuses around the country. Max Mars is another one of our speakers today. Max is a 21-year-old comedian from Minnesota who was diagnosed with depression when he was 13 years old. While in high school, he observed a series of social media posts from his good friend's sister and feared she may be suicidal. He decided to intervene, reaching out to her parents to share his concerns and encouraging them to get involved. Last but certainly not least, Ariel Blackwood has joined us to share her own lived experience with the issue of suicide. Ariel's a junior at Furman University in South Carolina. After losing her brother to suicide in 2008 and her own attempt several years later, Ariel became a passionate advocate for sharing her story. As you can see, we have a diverse and dynamic group here today who will share their thoughts and experiences around teens, technology, and suicide. With that, we're going to kick off our conversation today with Dr. Dan Reidenberg. Dan, you're a leading expert in suicide prevention, and I know you've worked closely with social media platforms like Facebook to develop recommendations for addressing suicide online. Can you tell us a bit about teen suicide and the role, either positive or negative, social media is playing in teen suicide today?
Sure. Thanks, Jack, and thank you for coordinating this and all the participants that are here with us today. This is a critical issue for us in our society. we definitely need to do more and get people involved. And that means people everywhere, because everybody is responsible for suicide prevention. This is a public health issue. It is not just left up to one government or one mental health agency or even one social service agency. Everyone is involved in this. And social media plays a significant role in that. The most recent Pew Research study showed that approximately 92% of teens are online, 71% saying most of the day, 24% saying constantly being online. And we know that through social media, there are both positive and negative impacts, as you had mentioned earlier. Let me come back to that, but start quickly with some of the myths and misconceptions, because I think this is one area that really we have an opportunity to change. Today, the narrative is around a teen suicide because of a breakup of a relationship or a fight with a parent. Today, another narrative is that there's this epidemic of suicide, and the reality is that the teen suicide rates have remained relatively stable for the last several years and even dropped. What's also probably more astounding to some people is that while we lose about 41,000 people to suicide per year, it's about 4,800 that we're losing that are teens. It is the lowest rate category of all of the age groups. So we need to change some of those misconceptions, and we need to change some of those things that the people think are happening that are really not happening to our teens. But with social media and the engagement that they have with it, sometimes it's very positive. Sometimes teens will get on that are very depressed, and they will find helpful resources. They will find support groups. They will find chat rooms. They will find good information out there. And that's a really fantastic piece to social media. At Facebook, earlier this year, we launched a new app that allows people to get help for somebody who they're worried about. And it allows that person who's at risk to actually get tips on how to handle some of their stress, direct connections and local resources and supports. There are a lot of things that social media can do today that it couldn't do before that allow teens to get immediate access to help. And those are the positive sides. But at the same time, we have some negative impacts of social media. We know that, for example, cyberbullying affects about a quarter of teens today. And of those teens, we know that there's more depression and more anxiety, some more substance abuse. While there's no research that provides a direct causal link between bullying and suicide, it does. We do know that there's a link between increased thinking about suicide and suicide attempts. But we need to change some of those things in terms of how social media engages people. We don't want social media to normalize suicide because it isn't a normal process. So we need to help people understand how to use social media differently, and that includes teens. I think a couple other things that are really important for today's conversation has to do with responsible coverage of suicide. The more, as you stated in your opening, the more that the media can portray this accurately, that we don't over-sensationalize one person's death or how someone died by suicide, but that we talk about a full range of perspectives for them, that we offer them help and support, and we let them know that there's treatment and that treatment works and that recovery is possible. The more we can actually get people to believe in that, and the more people in your networks, your social service networks, your online networks that help you, the better chance you're going to have to turn your life around and lead a full, productive, and stable life. I think those are some of the most important things. And finally today, when those people are reporting on suicide, to look at reportingонsuicide.org. This is the world's leading site for getting responsible coverage and tips on how to talk about suicide safely, how to reduce the stigma and shame, how to engage people in this movement to save more lives. Those are the kinds of things that we want people to know about today.
Great, thanks, Dan. Appreciate your thoughts and a nice overview there on the issue. Next up, Vic Schwartz. Vic, I understand. I know that the JED Foundation has been very involved in suicide prevention. Can you share with us some of the initiatives underway within JED to promote an open conversation around mental health and suicide among teens and college-aged individuals? And also to build capacity around suicide prevention, both online and on campus. So as this conversation begins, how prepared are we to engage teens that may be at risk?
Yeah, thanks, Jack, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the Action Alliance for taking the initiative in organizing this series of webinars over the course of Suicide Prevention Month. The JED Foundation does a lot of work, and one of the nice things about the capacity that's developed on social media with online resources that are so available and are so used by young people is that it's really created a tremendous opportunity for us to share information, to share knowledge about mental health, about help seeking with young people who might not otherwise have access to this information. So at the JED Foundation, we started out as a foundation specifically focused on suicide prevention in college students and have grown to really encompass working in the suicide prevention and mental health promotion area for young people in general, because we recognize that the populations and communities aren't so well defined, and we really need to be speaking to everybody and their resources and opportunities to speak with everybody and really provide guidance. So as Dan mentioned before, and it's a pleasure, we seem to have this habit of having Google Hangouts together that we're both on the same panels. As Dan mentioned, Facebook has been really doing some leading work in developing resources and tools in addition to some of the guidance that Dan and SAVE has developed for them. The JED Foundation, working actually with the Clinton Foundation and Facebook and Instagram, has developed a one-page guide for users of Facebook and Instagram, which is available internationally. It's been translated into a bunch of different languages and provides local resources, really gives guidance to young people about how to identify when you or your friend might be in trouble. And what we've tried to do is focus on what kinds of messages and communications on Facebook or Instagram might give clues or suggestions that someone needs help. I think one of the really important things to emphasize and recognize, a lot of times in the suicide prevention world, we're kind of like cardiologists or doctors running around looking for people with chest pain. We're looking for people who are in a crisis, and it's very important that we know how to identify people who might be in a crisis. But one of the things we all need to think about doing better is figuring out who's in trouble emotionally, and how do we intervene earlier? How do we get people to the services and care they need? And how do we know that particularly young people who may struggle with with swings of emotion and strong emotions at various times? So we've tried to provide this on Facebook. The JED Foundation has done this in a number of different settings online as well. Just to go back for a second, the Facebook guide can be found on Facebook's security page. If you go to security/tools, you can find this guide online. We have a number of other resources, including a partnership with MTV called Half of Us, which you can find at halfofus.com. This is a series of public service announcements, brief videos about mental health subjects, substance abuse-related subjects, help seeking. A lot of the focus of the site is really around how do you help and how do you be a good friend? Because we know that very often it's people in someone's surroundings who are the ones who really are the catalysts to people getting help when they need it, and are sometimes better positioned to connect people to the resources they need than the person who might be in the midst of a problem period might be him or herself. So those resources are available for free. They actually run on MTV on a fairly regular basis and run on MTV's University channel all the time, but they are available. Many colleges do use them as resources on their campuses for programs around mental health. We have another site which is a little bit more academic and college focused called U-Lifeline, which also includes an anonymous screening tool. So if people are thinking that they're uncertain whether they are, having a problem that reaches the level of requiring help, you can take the screener. It gives you feedback. It's completely anonymous, so there's no way for anyone finding out if you've taken the screener, and that was a conscious decision that we've made to make that available in that way. It also provides, again, tremendous amount of narrative mental health resources, information about other mental health organizations that are out there. And finally, Love is Louder, which is a kind of social media mutual support program that developed, it's been supported by Brittany Snow, who is a partner in this program, which really is trying to get people to, reach out, write each other positive messages of support online, let people know that, mutual care and mutual support can be very, very impactful. But again, the goal is to, help people feel connected, help people feel supported, and when the need arises, get people to the care and support that they might need.
Great. Thank you, Vic.
Sure.
I know that the JED Foundation has been doing a lot of work both to foster this open conversation around these issues and then building capacity on the back end to make sure there's service and access available. But, as you mentioned, some of these online conversations, some of these social conversations, not all groups find the internet and social media as safe and accepting as space as others. And David's here to talk with us from the Trevor Project, which focuses on the specific audience of LGBTQ youth. David, I know that this is a population that may have been disproportionately at risk for some of the negative aspects of social media and the internet. Perhaps you could talk with us a little bit about what Trevor Project is doing to reach this important group.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today as well. The Trevor Project is here specifically to serve lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth. We also work with a lot of allies to that population, those populations as well. And sometimes people think, why do LGBT people need their own specific service? And if you think about women's health care, for example, or where you might go to get a haircut. Sometimes if you think, if I have a certain kind of hair, I want to make sure I'm going to go to a stylist that can handle that kind of hair. Or if I have a certain kind of health condition, I want to go to a specialist that knows a whole lot about that. Well, the LGBT population has a number of characteristics or things that are in common, or even a language that different populations use that often will motivate those people to want to seek services from people who are almost guaranteed to really understand those issues innately. So the Trevor Project has a suite of services that intend to reach young people where they are. So we have a 24-hour lifeline, which is a sort of a traditional phone hotline service. We also have a digital crisis chat program and digital crisis text programming. So what we find is that our chat program, which is, it's not just it's an instant messaging program, but it's for youth who are in crisis. The vast majority of people who use our chat program are our youngest users, as opposed to the traditional phone line. So we're finding that really, in order to meet young people where they are, it's the online world. These are digital natives, as we refer to them. Young people, teenagers especially, but also people in the young 20s, have texting conversations that are just as meaningful as their voice phone conversations would be to people who are maybe over 35 or so, 30, 35. We also have an online social networking space called Trevor Space. Trevor Space has 128,000 users, and it's worldwide. Most of them are here in the United States. But it's a place where people can go online and be almost free from bullying and harassment that they might be able to see on Facebook. You can talk about your identity, your formation, a challenge you're having with your parents because of your forming identity, and not really, and you can post something about that, and within an hour, 8 people you've never met before who have a similar story to yours are already starting to connect with you. So imagine that you live in a rural a rural community somewhere in a southern state, and you think that you're the only one. Maybe you don't have access to a gay-straight alliance, or you don't have access to an LGBT center. Here's an online space where you can feel safe and build community, which we expect forms resilience and protective factors from depression and isolation. So we really try to see that there are two specific audiences. Kind of like Victor mentioned, there's the youth at risk, who we seek to serve and provide crisis intervention services for. And then there's the would-be helpful friend, or the would-be helpful teacher. So we provide education services for all of those folks to enhance their skills to intervene when they identify a peer or a student who might be at risk as well. So I did want to say, as you were talking about, the online space might not be as safe. When you talk about traditional bullying, before social media, before everybody had a cell phone, you might have what we call like an acute episode of bullying. You get pushed up against the locker, you get called a name, someone calls you fat, and you feel bad about it. You take that to class, but at the end of the day, you get to go home and be safe from that bullying. With the internet and cyberbullying, there's almost never a time when you're safe from that. It's a chronic, ongoing bullying. People are liking comments and commenting on comments. And young people almost obsessively have to keep checking those things. Their handheld devices, their cell phones, their iPhones, and their iPads are almost extensions of themselves, where someone in an older generation, someone, let's say, I'm going to keep using the 35 number, although I'm not going to have data to show that 35 is the magic number. But if you're, maybe 30 or over, a cell phone is a tool. It's a communication tool like the telephone or like a computer. But for younger people, it's really an extension of themselves. It's like their mouth and their ear. It's their connection to the world around them. It's their connection to all of their information. So when the bullying is happening there, it's chronic and almost inescapable. So they're sleeping with their cell phones next to them. It's 2:30 in the morning, and what if the phone rings and someone's going to text me? And I better text back, because if I don't, they're going to think something's wrong. So so that bullying is more chronic and can build up to multiple layers of emotional pain, let's just say, with the resilience that's harder to build around. I did want to mention something specifically about suicidal risk with the LGBT population. It's widely seen, and there are lots of data that show that lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are some 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight peers. And transgender youth, there's the best research that we have shows that some 40 to 45% of transgender people acknowledge that they've had a suicide attempt by the time they were 20 years old. However, we do not have data that shows that LGBT people die by suicide more than their straight peers, because we can't study people who have died by suicide, and death certificates don't have LGBT status listed on them. What we know is about suicide attempts, and so the work that we do is really an effort to study what we can, do the research that we can, and reduce the risk for suicide attempts among all the people who reach out to us. The last thing I wanted to, you know what, I'll stop there. I feel like I've probably taken up plenty of space.
No, that's great, and we're going to have plenty of time for questions as we continue the hangout here. We've already received a number of those, and right as soon as we complete our first round of comments from our panelists, we'll move right into questions. For those of you online now, a reminder, you can tweet your questions to #suicidereporting, and we'll be jumping into those in a minute. But to continue down through our panel, Chad, I think it was interesting how David was speaking about the capacity for the internet to reach individuals that may have been isolated before, and Trevor's attempt to meet individuals where they are. And I think about some of the comments that you've made about internet was the death to distance. Could you talk a little bit about that, and talk a little bit about how to write Love on Her Arms is really focused on storytelling as a means to break down stigma, to provide hope and encourage people to get support, breaking down those distance barriers so people feel like they are part of a greater whole.
Absolutely, and thanks again, just to echo everyone else's thank yous. Thank you from To Write Love in Her Arms as well for hosting this. So To Write Love in Her Arms, we are a nonprofit movement. We exist to present hope and find help for anyone struggling with depression, addiction, self-injury, and suicide. But we began essentially by accident. There was never a business plan to become what we are today. But originally, it was a story, the story about our friend Renee and her first 5 days in recovery from cocaine addiction and finding help with self-injury. And that help came in the form of community. That help came in the form of people who decided to be present in a moment of pain with someone whose story they believed in. So when you talk about To Write Love in Our Arms, it's natural to talk about story. And you know, when we talk about these issues, depression, addiction, self-injury, suicide, to be honest, I don't know if we as an organization or if we as a society would really be correct in trying to end all of those problems in total. But I do think we can effectively, on an individual, on a one-by-one basis, address the thing that's most dangerous, which is the stigma surrounding these issues. It's been described to me that that stigma is whenever silence is the loudest voice in a conversation. I can, you know, go back through a litany of anecdotes in my own life about the times that suicide has hit a community, has hit my community, and the lack of conversation surrounding those tragedies. So what we do at To Write Love in Our Arms is we try to meet people where they naturally come together, whether that's online or at a music festival. We do speaking events all the time in high schools, colleges, communities of faith, and all of that. We come with this message of, look, it's okay to not be okay, but don't think for a second that you're in this alone. So what we find is that people are ready to talk about these heavy things, especially suicide. If you frame a conversation, people are happy to interact with that. But unfortunately, people feel out of place bringing that up at the onset, and that's understandable. But when we talk about stories, we're talking about this form of communication that across the history of humankind has had one thing in common, that every story has had a storyteller, but I think more important than that, it's had an audience. So what we get to find is a connection of audiences, and audiences, not only do they get to provide life to the story, they also get to validate the life of the storyteller. When we talk about suicide, we're talking about a potentially fatal constriction of perspective. So what an audience can do is remind the storyteller of what's really going on, of things that we've forgotten to be true over the years. And what's true is that your life matters, that you are of unsurpassable worth, that you deserve to have people that connect to you. So we've been able to see the best of what the internet has to offer. We kind of came to our own existence during the heyday of MySpace, and over the years we've been able to further some conversations, and that always looks like a question. So right now we're in the thick of National Suicide Prevention Week. Tomorrow is World Suicide Prevention Day, and we've been working on this campaign that we call We'll See You Tomorrow. In this campaign, we're inviting people to share the response to this prompt of, you will see me tomorrow because. And it's been so beautiful. People really expressing some vulnerable parts of their life, but we're seeing the comments, we're seeing the likes, we're seeing the reblogs, we're seeing people say, you know what, I didn't have the words to describe what I was going through until I saw someone else express this. So we get to see a community begin to unfold. And in our minds, the most beautiful thing to come from this would be people seeking out mentors, seeking out friends and family, clergy and counselors, but these consistent and intentional relationships that can, again, validate the storyteller and grow a community of an audience. And you know, social media, we get to choose the story that we tell. We get to vent, we get to boast, we get to talk about the things that are really pulling at our heartstrings. And if we do this right, then I think social media becomes a great platform, not just to exist digitally, but to foster some honest and really beautiful relationships on a tangible, on a face-to-face, on a skin-to-skin level. So yeah, I say let's move on to other people because I'm curious about Q&A.
All right, great. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, no worries.
So Max, you know, I know that you've had your own personal experience with depression, and you were through that able to spot some signs that a peer of yours may have been in crisis online, and you took the the step to engage directly and help that individual. And you know, an example where social media and an engaged community online may have actually saved a life. Could you talk a little bit about your experience?
Definitely. I'm pretty active on social media, as a lot of people my age are. And I remember just kind of scrolling through feeds and things like that and seeing a post from a friend's sister. And this post was a picture of a bedroom saying it was the last time I'm ever cleaning this place. That was kind of weird. And other posts that followed about saying how it was the last time she was ever going to do something. And this kind of triggered something in my mind going, okay, you know, what does that mean? Why, you know, why are these things being said? And kind of going down the posts, seeing that she had stopped like doing gymnastics, seeing that she had all of a sudden posted about you know, feeling alone, and saying things that she wasn't going to do things that she loved anymore. And this seemed just really off, and I knew that these were tall tale warning signs. So I got a hold of her brother, who was a very good friend of mine, and I said, hey man, you know, your sister's saying these things. I'm wondering if, you know, could you say something to her or anything like that? And I was really worried that she wasn't going to trust me anymore for saying, you know, this to her family, that, you know, I wasn't going to be able to keep this friendship. But at the same time, I was thinking I'd rather lose a friendship but keep a life than anything else. So we finally got a hold of her parents, who were then able to intervene, all thanks to kind of being proactive on social media. And at the same point, social media is a heck of a tool to reach somebody as well. I was able to kind of reach out to her just for a quick second on social media, just by simply commenting on a post she made. And I feel like that that helps a lot, especially with having people who are going to say these things online, because it's almost easy to hide behind a keyboard, but be able to get out the way you're feeling because of that, than it is to sit down with somebody one-on-one and kind of state the way you're feeling. And I think that's why it makes it pretty dang easy on social media to get your feelings out. And that's kind of the broad overview of that situation and how social media can really help and hinder certain aspects of that.
Well, you know, Max, how do you think about that from, you know, sort of a social norms perspective? So on one hand, she's sharing these thoughts on social in a very public format, but at the other hand, you know, as you mentioned, you sort of felt like, were you betraying some implied trust by reaching out to her parents or her brother? You know, so what are the expectations? And, you know, that had to be a difficult, you know, call to pick that phone up. It probably felt pretty heavy in your hand, you know, when you were making that first call out to the parents.
I remember that first call, and I just remember stuttering, shaking, sweating, and just kind of feeling almost guilty for what I was doing. I felt like I was almost going behind her back, and just kind of looking at that. If you're somebody who's seeing a post like that, the best thing you can do is just say something. If you see something, say something, right? That's what they tell you at the airport. If you see something online, say something. Just start the dialogue. If somebody's posting it online, extremely public, right, options are that they might be willing to talk about it privately. And that was kind of my decision at the end of the day, was it's public, and I just kind of got to dive into this and say something.
Oh, that's great. Max, thanks for sharing that. And I want to turn it over to Ariel for a moment now. And, you know, Ariel, you know, I know you're joining us today with your own story, a story of lived experience, both from the loss of your brother as well as your own attempts. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. When I was 13 years old, my brother died by suicide. And 2 years later, when I was 15, I had my first so-called attempt because I had, it's considered an attempt because I had a plan. And a few years after that, my freshman year in college, I attempted again. And it wasn't until finally after that second attempt and living through having lost my brother to suicide and asking why for 5 years, that I kind of decided and discovered that social media could be an outlet for me as well as for other people. And I'll clarify there, like Max was saying, and like a lot of you are saying, that it's easier to hide behind a keyboard almost in a beautiful way, that we can hide behind it, but we can also step out because of it. And so I kind of decided that it was easier for me to tell my story via social media than it was to walk up to people at school and say, hey, I'm thinking about killing myself today, and my brother did it, so I'm thinking about doing it. And so I think that by being able to tell my story on social media, people were able to see, what, this is this class clown who we never knew was sad about anything, and now she's telling her story. Well, I actually feel that way too. And so then they would start to message me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it may be. And so I kind of found this outlet with social media, not when I was dealing with my own, but when I was in recovery. And it kind of gave me a way to be a source for other people to reach out to. And so then I really got on fire about suicide prevention and talking about my story and telling people, because they never expected that I would be sad or that I would have struggled with depression. Certainly not because I had it all together, just because I was a really good actor, I guess. But through all of this, my family and I formed a foundation called the Alex Blackwood Foundation for Hope in 2009, which I actually didn't get involved in until a few years later. And my mom and I, by the way, hey Mom, she's watching. But my mom and I made a camp called Camp Alex for youth survivors of suicide, for people who have attempted, for people who have lost people to suicide survivors in every way. And so this has become my baby, and it's kind of interesting because it all kind of started with this social media discovery that this is how I can tell my story and this is how I can get the word out there. And actually last night I had a girl from high school who had reached out to me. We never talked in high school, really. We had like one class together, but never ran in the same circles. And she had reached out to me after our freshman year and had said, I don't know who to talk to, but I'm thinking about killing myself. What do I do? And so I called my dad, who was still in Arkansas where she was. He got a hold of a therapist nearby. Anyway, we got her set up, and I got a message from her last night saying, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. I just want to let you know I'm no longer in college, but I'm really working on my mental health, and I'm so glad that you were able to talk to me. And we never talked on the phone. I don't even have her phone number. But that was all through social media. And so I think it is a beautifully dangerous thing, as Max was kind of saying too, but I think in my circumstances, social media has absolutely been just beautiful and an awesome way to share my story. So,
wow, what an awesome story, and thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's a great example, as you said, of how increasingly communication is happening online and in this social space. You don't have her number, but she found you and she reached out to you, and you were able to help her. That's terrific. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
When we have a number of questions out there, I'll remind folks again, we're taking them at hashtag suicide reporting. There have been a couple questions that have come in, and want to come back to some of the themes, Ariel, that you and Max were talking about. But before that, I want to hit a couple of the early questions that we received. And one was talking a little bit about prevention and how, Vic, Dan, how is prevention different in the collegiate setting or college-aged teens and teen plus, I guess, versus younger kids that might be, pre-college. How, if at all, are prevention efforts different? Tools, resources, etc.
Dan, do you want to start, or do you want me to take that?
Why don't you start, and I'll follow you.
Okay. Okay. So there are certain things that are unique about both college age and college settings. So one thing that's important to recognize is that this kind of 17 to 25-year-old age range is the age at which many of the major psychiatric illnesses first begin to manifest themselves. So you have then starting out a kind of template or foundation of challenge that sometimes this is a point in time where people are beginning to manifest signs of depression. I think it's important also to mention that there's a group of people who are at significant risk who we often miss talking about, which is people who are at the beginning of manifesting psychotic illnesses, whether bipolar disorder, people who are in the process of developing schizophrenia. I mean, these are both illnesses that have a high incidence and high risk of suicide, suicide attempts and suicide connected to them, and they're often not manifesting the kinds of typical problems that we associate with young people being suicidal. They're often not talking about being depressed or, you know, having the same kinds of communications and thoughts. So that's just something important to put on the table. The other thing for college students that's important to recognize is that they're also in many cases away from home for the first time, which carries both a series of challenges developmentally. For the first time, people are making decisions about what they're eating and how much sleep they're getting, and whether they're drinking or not drinking, or taking drugs or not taking drugs. And all of those things carry with them associated both benefits and risks. But certainly they can present a series of challenges. One of the advantages we have in college is that they're somewhat well-defined communities, which, you know, I've presented now some of the difficulties, but being in a well-defined community gives you tremendous opportunity to use tools like social media, advertising, communication, education, to, you know, get information out to people in ways that don't happen quite so much when people are just, you know, kind of living in a community at home. You know, schools, I think high schools and grade schools are typically not thinking as much about doing health and mental health education as we've begun to see happening on many college campuses. So there are both challenges of being away and the developmental shifts that are happening, but also advantages in the nature of the college community that give us opportunities to really intervene in ways that can be very profoundly robust and take advantage of the tools we have of people living together and hopefully feeling connected to each other.
Yeah, that's great, Vic. Let me just follow up with a couple of thoughts. When younger students, kids in junior high and definitely in high school, there's a lot of fear about talking about these issues, and most of the time it's only talked about after a suicide has occurred. As opposed to in college settings, we have a greater opportunity to talk about the prevention aspect of it. We'd like to do more at the younger ages, but in colleges we really can do that. At the younger ages, most of the effort is focused on educating the parents and even to some degree school counselors. At the college level, we can actually start really directing some of those awareness campaigns that Vic was talking about at those who are at risk and at the peers to be able to help them. There's greater amounts of support in those new times, as Vic was talking about the transition years. So there's a vast difference between how we do it in the younger years and how we do it in the college age population.
And so, you know, when you talk about, you know, Dan and Vic, and you're talking about particularly among some of the younger age pre-college where there may not be as many platforms for them to have this kind of conversation, you know, it sounds like social media, to, you know, Ariel and Max's experience is a testament to that this is increasingly a platform where they can start to find their voice around some of these issues. You know, and Dan, you talked earlier around some of the tools that are available out there. David, I think you can chat briefly just about one of those tools is Facebook's tool to report, not to report, to reach out to someone that you may be connected with online if you're concerned about them.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, Facebook has developed a beautiful, what they call their suicide prevention flow, and so and most people are not aware of it because it is a little bit hidden. But if you see a comment on Facebook that indicates someone's thinking about suicide, you can hit the now. And I also want to emphasize that this is only available in the United States, and as of April, it was only available in about 30% of markets. So there is plans for expansion. But if you don't see the menus exactly as I list them out, then sit tight, and hopefully these things will become available where you are as well. But they're all available from a handheld device too. You don't have to be at a computer. But on the comment, you can hit the down caret and report. And if you go through this shouldn't be on Facebook, then you have options that start to become this is suicidal language. And then if you follow the suicidal language flow, eventually what's neat about Facebook is they don't say, okay, we got it, thanks for letting us know. They, like Trevor Space, have identified now two audiences, the person at risk and the would-be helpful friend. So if you've now reported the language as this is suicidal, Facebook then says, well, what do you want to do about it? And gives you a number of options. Because a lot of people say, well, I don't know what to say to this person. Facebook actually gives you sample language that you could even copy and paste into your message to that person that is a message of support to reach out. Or you could recruit other friends, and then it will pop up with other people in your friend network that you might recruit to help you support that person. Or if it's very, very intense and this is maybe a little bit too much for you, one of the options is, which is, it's strong to realize when something is too much for you, by the way. I want to say we shouldn't all try to be superheroes that fix every problem. But one of the options is report this specifically to Facebook, and their safety and security team will look into it within its context even more so, and might actually engage in some additional crisis intervention responses.
Great, thank you, Dave. And I think, Dan, you wanted to mention also there's another tool out there, another site, called preventtheattempt.com. You want to share that with our audience as well?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know about preventtheattempt.com. This was the best practices for online technologies. All of the major social media companies came together. Save and Facebook hosted several summits. Twitter, Google, Microsoft, Apple, everybody was there. And we developed what could be how people interact with somebody who is suicidal online. And we developed a set of best practices for that. They come in high, moderate, and low risk, whether you want to do really advanced work in it or you just want the basics. And we have examples on that website, preventtheattempt.com, as how anybody who's interacting with the public can respond to people who are suicidal, can have policies and procedures around that. And that's a really important tool that is listed as a best practice.
Great, thank you. And it's interesting here. Max, you alluded to early in your comments about that. You weren't an expert in suicide prevention. You were just online, and you had enough familiarity with your friend, with your own experience, that you sensed something wasn't right, and you were paying attention. You dug a little deeper. You looked a little closer. And you continued to have concerns, and you reached out. And there are a lot of tools out there that can help you once you've identified that there's a concern or an issue, to help you navigate that. The tool Dan mentioned with Prevent the Attempt, the Facebook tool. There are crisis lines that you can call as not as someone who's suicidal, but someone who's concerned about someone who might be suicidal. You can reach out, and they can help you and talk you through it. So, I think that's a very important message for everybody to hear here, that you don't have to be an expert in suicide prevention. As long as you're engaged, you care, and you show that you care, and you show that you're there and you're listening. That's Max, you mentioned that you just texted back when you were concerned to let her know someone was out there. Someone had read her post and was listening. Who knows what impact that had, but it reminded her that she wasn't alone. I think, Ariel, you mentioned, I think earlier in one of our calls, you had said that you've had to write Love in Her Arms t-shirt since you were in 9th grade. Can you talk just a little bit, and Chad, jump in on how these stories are helping give teens a voice around this issue, and breaking down that distance barrier that David was talking about before as well, because there might not be somebody in your class or your community that's gone through exactly what you have, but there's someone out there, in the social media realm that probably has.
Oh, go ahead, Ariel.
Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Same time. For me, it was. Yes, okay, I'm here. Got it, thanks. For me, I had seen the To Write Love on Her Arms t-shirts all around school, and there was like, you know, the really artsy kids were wearing them, and I was like, oh, I want to be an artsy kid, so I'm going to wear one. And it was like everywhere you would go, we would see these t-shirts, and people were talking about it, and I honestly didn't know what it was, but I got a t-shirt because bandwagon, and so it wasn't until actually later, my sophomore year, when I had attempted the first time that I looked into, okay, what is this To Write Love on Her Arms anyway? I've had this t-shirt in my closet and I've been wearing it around. And then I found out what it was, and I was like, oh my goodness, how crazy is this that this has been surrounding me the whole time, yet I have not reached out. So I think just the little things like, you know, having the cool kids wear the t-shirts, no, anyone, but just seeing that and recognizing what even is this? It'll cause you to go on Google and Google it, or to make you think about what you're wearing. And I think that is huge because, you know, we could get into this whole discussion of subliminal messaging and you know, media and all of this stuff, but I think that it's really important that and it gives people a segue, because that's getting the word out there. It's, my dad always says, let's break the silence of suicide, and that's breaking the silence of something. It's breaking the silence of talking about it, at least. And so I'll turn it over to you, Chad, and you can touch on logistics.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that support. And you know, it's, if we've been able to see anything at To Write Love in Our Arms, it's the value of, again, just beginning a conversation. We'll clean up whatever this looks like a little bit later, but let's just start this conversation. So there's a big difference when you're talking about you know, how people express themselves online through Facebook, through Twitter, Instagram, all that. It really only has significance when someone else is interacting with that, when that conversation begins. So that played out when you're wearing a shirt. Hey, what does that mean? All of a sudden we're talking about something like suicide that we don't often find ourselves discussing. So I think wrapped up in this is the idea that we need to really broaden and find more opportunities to expand our emotional vocabulary, so that when you go online and you post that you had a bad day or that you're angry, okay, cool, what kind of angry are you? Is this rage? Is this frustration? Is this stress? Where is this emotion leading you towards? And as we grow this language together, which can only be done in conversation, we need to have someone teach us these words, and we need to have someone to bounce those words off of to make sure that we're using them appropriately. Then we find something of immense value, that it's one thing to talk about suicide, it's something completely differently to talk about it appropriately. When we talk about it appropriately, we're putting the individual as the point of focus instead of this big scary, Ariel, I think you mentioned it on a call last week, the S word. We don't talk about the S word. So let's talk about the person and address this person in their moments of pain, address them in their moments of celebration, and if that starts online, beautiful. But again, we hope that this will get us, lead us in a direction of more emotional intelligence, and yeah, so.
And that's a great point, you know, Chad. And I think that you know, some of the questions out there have also asked or focused around some of the concerns around cyberbullying and the relationship to suicide. And you know, in Dan's opening remarks, I think, you know, Dan, I think you mentioned that a quarter of teens report some level of suicide, or I'm sorry, some level of bullying, online bullying at some point. But we know the overwhelming majority of those teens are not then attempting or completing suicide. So bullying is a very big issue, but suicide is a complex issue. And you know, the more it seems that we can get narratives out from and provide opportunities for teens to connect with other teens that have been through those experiences, similar experiences, that's a very significant protective factor in this, and an important thing that, you know, I think anyone out there realizes, that you can be the unfortunate victim of bullying online, but there are others out there that can help you. There are resources, there are support, there are safe spaces like Trevor Space if you feel like you can't find your voice through some mainstream channels. Another question that came up were parents, and how can parents engage with their kids if their kids are on the phone all the time? And so maybe Max and Ariel, you can talk just briefly to this. If your kid's on the phone all the time, and as David said, it's a tool for the parent, it's not an extension of themselves, how can they become part of it? How can they connect with their children? How can they be available and be attuned to some of the issues that might be going on?
I'd love to jump on that. One thing that when I talk to parents, one thing I say is, if your kid's doing it, why not you? Your kid's on Facebook, your kid's on Twitter. Why don't you go ahead, just jump on Facebook, jump on Twitter. It's a great way to kind of keep an eye on everything that's going on in the world. If you're friends with your kid on Facebook, I'm friends with my parents on Facebook. They're going to be the first one to kind of jump and say something to me if they ever saw anything.
Ariel, you want to add anything to that?
I think Max pretty much summed it up. I mean, my parents can tell my mental health by just what I'm involved in, almost. And so I think it's important that I'm at college 700 miles away, and they're not helicopter parents, but they stay in touch with me, whether that be liking my posts on Instagram, like, I see you, like, I know what you're doing. And that can be a good thing, It's not like I'm trying to hide anything from them. It's just that I think what Max is saying is good. If your kids are doing it, why not you do it? We get frustrated because our parents, my parents, my dad, they post on Facebook like more than they talk to us at the dinner table, maybe. I don't know. But I think that it can be an important thing to look and say, hey, my kid's posting a lot of party photos lately, and I know that when she's partying, she's usually not as academically focused and not, where she needs to be emotionally. Let me check up on her. And so I think that's important for friends and things too, but your parents are your parents and they know you best, and so they gotta crack the whip sometimes, but in a good way. I mean, I think that I basically have just rephrased everything Max has said in more words, and so I'm going to stop. But I overall think that it is a very helpful thing for parents to be on social media and being able to point those things out.
Yeah, and if I may just add to that, I think that's a really beautiful opportunity, not to be a helicopter parent, but to assert the humanity of the child, that you are giving them free reign to express themselves, and you get to admire who this young person is turning into. With these words like suicide, you're talking about someone that is going through a tailspin, going through a crisis where they feel they've lost a sense of power. So as parents, as loved ones, as friends, and as siblings, if we check in on them regularly and graciously on social media, we give them the freedom to express. We give them the option to take the story in different directions. We let them know that, hey, the decisions you make are yours, but we're going to continually remind you of different options that perhaps you haven't considered. So it's different than being a helicopter. It's way more being a cheerleader, saying, hey, let me know the ways that I can continue to serve you, even if we are 700 miles away. You're still on my mind. You're still on my heart.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Chad. Well, I look at the clock here, and we're at the end of our hour. Dan, I know you give a lot of thought to the issue of suicide prevention, and specifically this population of teens and technology and social media. Kind of turn it to you for some last comments before I wrap things up with a few logistics at the end.
Oh, great, thanks, and thanks to all the panelists who really provided some incredible insight for us today. And even this last set of information, there's actually new research out about how when parents engage with kids in their social media of all ages, they can actually reduce the risk of suicide. So there's a lot coming with this, but I think the most important message that we can really get out today is that the story of suicide prevention is changing today. It is moving away from a story of fear and shame and stigma and not talking about it at all to, in large part because of social media, it being a tool. And yet, with that tool, we still need people behind that tool. Whether you're talking about Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, it's people, real people, that when they come together with social media, all together have the power to save many, many more lives.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. Well, again, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and in particular our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their story and their expertise around this important issue. You can continue the conversation online by using the hashtag suicide reporting. If you have questions that weren't answered on the call today, or if you are a reporter looking for a follow-up interview, please email us at standtogether@reingold.com. Again, that's standtogether@reingold, REINGOLD.com. A recording of this discussion will also be made available online at actionalliancesp.org. The next panel in this series will focus on military and veteran suicide and will take place next Wednesday, September 16th, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you're interested, you can register online if you're interested in that at actionalliancesp.org/veterans. Again, if you visit actionalliancesp.org, you can find a recording of today's session. You can also find a recording from last week's, which focused on men in the middle years. There were a few questions out there about men and suicide among men, and there's some very helpful information and resources available on each one of these pages. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks again for your time today.